All right, we will reconvene. E, request for further direction regarding the temporary warming shelter.
Good evening, Council. Today I'm looking for further clarification on the motion approved on September 13th that directed the Wetaskiwin Shelter Subcommittee to start moving on the organization of the setup and operations of a fenced encampment act as a temporary warming shelter 24/7 until March 31st, 2022. So currently, this committee, which has grown organically through the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness, is composed of representatives and or volunteers from the following community agencies and organizations. Wetaskiwin FCSS, which also acts as the chair and providing support staff for administrative purposes. The Rock Soup Greenhouse and Food Bank, Camrose Open Door, Wetaskiwin and District Heritage Museum, the Ministry of Community and Social Services, Alberta Rural Development Network, Rock Soup, Food Bank and Greenhouse, Lighthouse Fellowship, as well as several citizens at large. This is the official list for the Winter Shelter Subcommittee. Administration has a number of concerns that the current membership of this committee, while representative of the overall community, is not structured to oversee a temporary warming shelter that aligns with Council's expectations and leading practices from supporting shelter, policing, and medical agencies. Administration believes that in an effort to enhance the overall governance, transparency, and accountability of the proposed shelter operations, administration would recommend that an advisory board be established by Council to oversee both the startup and operations of the shelter, and that it consists of the following representatives: one member of City Council, an Indigenous community representative, Wetaskiwin FCSS, RCMP, the Alberta Health Services, Ministry of Community and Social Services, Alberta Rural Development Network, and City Administration. We provided a motion for Council's consideration that would help clarify and approve this advisory committee and act as clarification of the original Council motion dated September 13th, 2021. I will note, and something I didn't provide in my report, that there are several committees and meetings that administration is being brought into. And so this is also in an effort to consolidate all of those meetings into one and to focus all of our efforts from administration's perspective into moving this piece forward and supporting it moving forward. I can answer any questions that Council may have.
I move that City Council directs administration to create a winter shelter advisory committee as outlined in the report titled Request for Further Decision, Temporary Warming Shelter, dated September 27, 2021, to oversee the startup operations of the shelter, that the board report to Council on a monthly basis to ensure the shelter aligns with Council and community expectations.
Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Any discussion? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I thought FCS was looking after the whole operation, but now we're going to see the startup of it. We're organizing it. Does that down the road implicate us as the total control to pay bills or stuff like that? I was under the impression FCS was going to manage it. We were just going to help them to find funding.
Through the mayor to Councillor Branco, the motion, and I won't read the full thing, but it says move that City Council, this is the motion that was approved on September 13th, move that City Council direct the Winter Shelter Subcommittee. And so it doesn't actually direct Wetaskiwin FCSS or administration, but it directs the Winter Shelter Subcommittee. And as noted in my report, the Winter Shelter Subcommittee is made up of a number of community organizations as well as 2 agencies that also provide those services in our community. And further to the motion, there is a piece here that none of the motion can be carried forward unless the funding is received. And so by approving the recommended motion that we have in front of you this evening, the winter shelter motion from September 13th would essentially be overseen by the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee, which has the representatives that I've outlined in the report. And then that subcommittee would come back to council on a monthly basis to have conversations about how the operations and startup of the shelter are going, and to allow for some transparency in the community of exactly how this operation is being run. And if there are issues as they pop up, as things continue, that we would be able to address those right away instead of waiting on them to become bigger issues.
Oh, Paul, sorry, I read it twice while you're reading that. So the committee is overseeing this, all these organizations working together.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Branco, the original motion reads the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee, and we're asking for clarification on whether or not you want the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee as currently noted with its membership, or if you'd rather have the advisory committee that we're recommending that has operations and agencies in there that have the expertise around shelter, policing, and medical supports.
Councilor Nielsen.
I'd like to follow up Councilor Bronco's question, I guess. Paul, can you explain how a city committee doesn't tie governance and responsibility directly back to city?
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen. The city advisory board, I think of this as more of as an advisory board. So if this was created, council still has, they're an advisory board to council. So council still has the say on whether or not you want to green light the shelter at the end of the day. What it provides though is a lens and a level of expertise that says, from a medical, policing, and shelter perspective, this is how we want to move forward, and more of a detailed recommended business plan as to how this would operate moving forward. So the funding, if received, would be funneled through the city and Wetaskiwin FCSS, because those are the two groups that have either applied for grants or have through the mayor has done the lobbying. And so nothing could proceed without A, the funding first and foremost, and B, the green light from council, because this is an advisory board. What it does provide though, and working on a key learning from the 24/7 shelter operated by the Camrose Open Door, is provides for a level of expertise that we do not have on administration to recommend to council, here's how you should proceed to for the benefit of the vulnerable population, and for council to use that information as they see fit to make decisions based off of it.
So taking that philosophy a step further, does that then, commit the city to a shelter of some sort every year following?
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen, from my perspective, it does not, because the motion to create this winter shelter sits with council based off of funding that we have yet to receive. And so maybe I just ask for some more clarification on what perspective you see there.
It also has an end date too of March 31st of 2022. So this does not tie the city's hands in terms of a warming shelter perpetually.
And so who would be the legal entity to hire security, hire an agency to operate it, to do those kinds of things?
Yeah, great question. We've had some conversation through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen. We've had some conversations with Wetaskiwin FCSS. So right now you have city council directing the motion. You have city administration with Wetaskiwin FCSS receiving the funding, and now an advisory board of people with the right expertise sitting there advising council on what to do. The piece we're missing right now is an agency or an entity to be able to do those things. And so there's two ways of going about it. You can either create one, like the advisory board could come to council and say, we recommend creating a not-for-profit that runs this piece, in which case it's hiring your executive director, doing all of those pieces. And the more simple route is to hire an agency that has done this in other communities, of which For your information, in discussions with Wetaskiwin FCSS, we have spoken to 2 agencies now, one from Edmonton, one from Calgary, that are prepared to come in here to help with this, but it's really dependent upon the advisory board getting looped in, because they don't exist right now. And we would hope that the advisory board could get up to speed with the work that Wetaskiwin FCSS, the Guiding Coalition, as well as the administration has done from when the motion was made until now, that they'd be able to look at the information, provide their own feedback, and then recommend something to council. But to your point, an entity would need to be created or subcontracted through an MOU to be able to proceed with a winter shelter. And speaking with AHS and some of the people that we would have on this advisory board, proceeding without an agency or proceeding with just private security in a big open shelter would not be feasible. It would be a risk to the city, most likely.
And so this advisory committee would be charged with the responsibility of launching this program, dependent upon resources. And so how does this committee, pardon me, in your mind, move forward? I mean, we've had the conversations, they've had the conversations with 2 providers. They're waiting to hear based on dollars. Building a fence based on dollars, bringing in trailers based on dollars, all of which we don't have. So how does this advisory committee move forward to be making decisions to actually launch the project?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Nelson, you're right. This whole thing is dependent on funding. We don't have any funding right now. But if we were to get funding tomorrow, we need to be ready to go. And so administration, Wetaskiwin and FCSS have been trying to line up all the dominoes so that we're just checking boxes essentially if the funding comes through, so that this is able to proceed. Another way to think of this is last summer when the Open Door came, there was council and then there was the executive director of the Open Door. But there was no advisory board. And I think there was a lot that we learned from the lack of that entity. Another piece too is that we are pulled into an absolute ton of meetings with the groups that would be on this advisory board in the absence of this existing. And they're having very similar conversations about the homeless encampment, about vaccinations, about assisted isolation sites. When administration's recommendation is to have it all in one spot and focuses them on anything vulnerable population. So what's going on with the ACES site? What's going on with the homeless encampment? What's going on with vaccinations? What's going on with the winter emergency shelter? The funding may still not come through for the winter emergency shelter, but we now still have a governing board that is working to talk about what are we doing for this population. It also takes Wetaskiwin, FCSS, and administration out of the driver's seat for a lot of this piece, because just use previous comment, we've been pulled into this, which takes up a ton of, really, it's my time and Misty's time. And this is, from our perspective and our recommendation, is the better way to proceed.
And then my last question would be, and I guess it speaks a little bit to Joe's comment a meeting or 2 ago, but would this particular committee also be at the same time examining other alternatives in the event that funding doesn't come in or trailers can't be put together? So for example, a couple of meetings ago, Joe talked about busing them elsewhere. I don't know the total context in which it was presented, but potentially we still have a vulnerable population that needs some care. And if we can't provide it, would this committee be examining those alternate options?
Through the Mayor, to Councillor Nelson, yes. And you've hit on a piece that why it's so incredibly important is that we could get $0 coming back, in which case now are we faced with a winter encampment? And is AHS and the RCMP and all the people on board, are we okay with doing a winter encampment, or is there something better? And what can we do for the funding? Or what I've noted with an agency like AHS is that they have the ability to find dollars sometimes that we're not able to get, right? And so regardless of what happens with the funding for council's motion as approved on September the 13th, this board would essentially exist to provide advice to council on what to do, instead of essentially coming directly to administration, who then has to take it away and meet with these groups individually. Instead, it's almost like a think tank to say, here's the next best step.
Thank you.
Councilor Billingsley.
Thank you. So have all, Paul through the chair, have all of these representatives of these different groups been contacted and are they all
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley, we've hinted at this with I think all of them. We are meeting with them all right now, either through the Guiding Coalition, Wetaskiwin and Task Force encampment, or other methods. So this is essentially consolidating everybody's time into one place to go. Another thing that it's doing, it's removing our administration right now is showing up to meetings with AHS where other agencies that aren't allowed to operate in our community are, and it's not as productive, right? Where this is focusing our efforts on who can operate in the community, who's got the expertise, who has the resources. Let's move forward. These are decision makers. And one of the things we've learned through the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness is that there's sometimes where you have to make decisions, and there's times where you just need advice. And this board here would be providing advice back to City Council, but then also having the resources to be able to remove roadblocks and stuff very specific to the shelter.
So, excuse me. So the original presentation was a subcommittee of FCSS. So do you envision this being spearheaded by FCSS and then of them being the rallying point or the chair or whatever you see the organization being?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley, I would envision this as being a council committee for us to bring the administration to bring all these folks together to move that motion forward, and then administration to use this group to funnel reports and ideas before they come to council in regards to that winter shelter. So the best example might be, there's two agencies that FCSS and administration have been speaking to really high level. The next best decision is how do we choose one of those? Instead of administration recommending that, we're having the advisory board recommending that based off X, Y, and Z for them to present back. In regarding to the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness and the Wetaskiwin Emergency Shelter Subcommittee, the Wetaskiwin Emergency Shelter Subcommittee has done a lot of really great work over the few months that we're tasked with bringing options to council. I believe, in speaking with Misty, that the decision or the plan there is to essentially end that committee's life because it served its purpose. And if the shelter, if we do find the funding and the winter shelter gets moving, that the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness will essentially focus a lot of their efforts now on transitional housing and the other supports that need to tie into this so that people aren't using the shelter as a home, that they're using it as an emergency spot, and that we're getting people, the vulnerable population, the transitional supports they require.
Yeah, because I think it's important that this committee group don't lose focus of what the motion says. The other portions of it, like you say, there are other groups to address those other concerns.
Yeah, so through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley, this advisory board, very specific to the motion, but to Councillor Nielsen's point, if the funding doesn't come through for a shelter, we still, the initial essence behind the motion was we need to do something for the vulnerable population. And if council didn't direct us at all to do anything, we would be pulled in 9 different spots by the RCMP, AHS, PCN, everybody that wants to know what we're doing. And I'd like to see city administration recommends that we be in the driver's seat for those and funnel things through an advisory board.
Thank you.
Councilor Bronco.
I'm very confused. On September 13th, we were here, FCS was here. They wanted to look after this project. All we were going to do, give them a free piece of land, made some rules that we wanted fenced and not a penny coming from the city. We would help them find funding. Now you're telling me council are going to sit on a committee, which is going to take money because they're sitting on committees and they charge for committees. We're looking at it. And it seems like FCS now is walking away from any responsibility of setting this up and leaving it up to the city to organize it. I want to know from you, at the end, who's paying the bills here? Because if we don't have, it seems like we're stuck with the bill again. And that's not what we told the public. We are helping to support a winter warm shelter. We will help them find it, but it's up to them to set up their organization, because we fought here, we wanted to have, they're looking after security. But why is all of a sudden things are keep changing, we're involving city administration, city. I don't understand. When we made a motion, I want this warm shelter to go, but it seems like we're gonna get stuck with the bill. FCS is walking away.
Through the mayor to Councilor Branco, all that's changing here based off of the existing motion with the clarification that I'm asking for is that the initial motion directed the Wetaskiwin Emergency Shelter Subcommittee, not Wetaskiwin FCSS. Wetaskiwin FCSS was a part of that subcommittee, but it included all the other groups and agencies that I've talked about on page 1 of my report. As far as the funding of this goes, none of this will happen without any funding from other sources of government, provincial, federal, regional.
When the funding comes in and all utility bills and everything comes in, who is it going to? FCS or the city of Wetaskiwin?
Through the mayor to Councilor Branco, it would really depend on what the advisory board recommends. If they were to find an agency that came into town and says, here's how much money we need to operate over the next 5 months, and here's our expectations, and we had an MOU signed with that group, then and the funding resides with the Wetaskiwin FCSS in the city, then the agency would charge back their costs to where the grant is coming from, whether or not it's the city or Wetaskiwin FCSS.
Question is, the funding, when you get all these organizations, who does the bill go to? Because we're obviously not holding any monies. This money's going to the FCS. I don't know, committees, if committee has their authorization to hold that kind of money, maybe $1 million. Who does the bill and invoices go? When those trailers are dropped off, those utility bills are going, where does the bill go to?
So just through the mayor to Councilor Branco, as an example, let's just say the city received like $1.2 million to operate a shelter over 5 months, and it came directly from the federal government. And then through the advisory board got up to speed and recommended that we proceed with agency X out of Regina as hypothetical. City and the agency X from Regina would have an agreement to operate for 5 months for a specified amount of money. And because the city owns the grant for 1.2 million, any costs that are associated with that grant would come to the city, and then the city would therefore pay on behalf of the grant back to the agency. Because we're holding, it's the way the motion currently reads, it's either the city of Wetaskiwin or Wetaskiwin FCSS that would hold the funding.
I was under the impression we helped them find it, the funding, and give it to them. So basically, the funding is going to come because they have, you keep saying they have more possibility of getting grants that we can't get grants. So why is the grant coming to us, not them?
Through the mayor to Councilor Branco, it's really hard at this point in time to know where the money is going to come through. I know that the Ministry of Community and Social Services has had a lot of conversations with me over the past week, asking specific questions about a winter shelter. And so there's some funding that may come to the city. In those discussions, it would have to come to the city, right? That's just the way they operate. I know for a fact that Wetaskiwin FCSS has also applied for a number of other grants. So we might be in a situation here where we have funding split between the two entities, and I'm not sure the best way to proceed at that point in time. I would look to advice from our CFO here, but whoever holds the grant would need to essentially spend against that grant. And so we couldn't ask the agency, we couldn't ask an advisory board to do that. It would have to be either the city or Wetaskiwin FCSS.
So Paul, hypothetical question. We're at the end of September. October is around the corner this week. We have no funding. We have no trailers. Middle of November, what do we do? Does the city have to pay up the bills to put up all these people up now?
Through the mayor to Councilor Branco, until we get any funding, there would be no money expended, no capital or operating dollars would be spent.
Thank you. That's what I wanted. Thank you.
Councilor Nielsen.
Maybe this question is through the chair to Paul. Is really maybe about FCSS mandate, I don't know. What would preclude the establishment of a FCSS advisory board for a emergency warming shelter? So instead of the advisory board being advisory to the city, it's an advisory board to FCSS, who is taking direction from the city.
Through the mayor, Councillor Nelson. Taskman FCSS at this point hasn't been directed to do anything on behalf of city council. And if you were to set up a winter emergency shelter advisory committee that advised Wetaskiwin FCSS board on what to do with a shelter, because council made the motion and council has been very specific about what they're looking for, you'd be asking the Wetaskiwin FCSS board to make those decisions on what should happen or shouldn't happen with a winter emergency shelter. And would keep you folks out of a conversation that I believe council wants to be a part of. And council's initial motion, you folks were the one that directed the work, not the Wetaskiwin FCSS board.
Thank you.
Are you looking for who is going to sit on that board or committee from council in the motion? My memory is poor some days. Anything further?
I'm sorry, where are we at?
I'm going to call for the question.
And what,
Motion on the floor?
but you asked the question whether we needed a representative in the motion.
No, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, not in this motion.
Second motion.
Thank you.
Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Who wants to sit on the committee?
I was going to make a motion. I move that city council appoints Councillor Wayne Nielsen to the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee. So you can't say no.
I sure can.
It is on. Yep.
Yeah.
So. Do you need me to repeat that? Okay, I move that city council appoints Councillor Wayne Nielsen to the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee.
Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Any discussion?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm wrestling with this.
Does anybody else want to sit on the committee?
No, I'm not saying I don't.
And that's fine.
Oh, okay.
I'm asking if anybody wants to sit on the
Oh,
committee.
sorry.
Councillor Blatz? Okay.
Through the chair to Paul, is there an expectation then, because it's a city committee, that whoever represents council would be the chair of that committee?
Through the mayor to Councillor Nelson, we haven't given it that much more thought. The way how I have been operating is we generally get the group to select a chair. We don't have a terms of reference for or anything like that developed just yet. So probably our first order of business would be to do that together and then make those decisions as a group.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Not with chairing. I'm okay with my name standing.
Councillor Hilgerman?
Wouldn't it be better that we just have that the city council appoints a counselor to the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee second meeting in November? Because
What we're deciding.
what's the point of appointing somebody that they might not be on, might not be here?
There's still 3 weeks left of work to do prior to the election.
Okay.
if it was going to change, yep. Your mic's off and you're not talking into it. So I would vote
Okay.
against this just based on, I think that Councillor Blatz would be a good representative at that, on that committee. Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Opposed? I'd vote is defeated. I would need a subsequent motion or a follow-up motion for another appointee.
Question, please.
Sure.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Hilderman.
I move the city council appoints Gabriel Blatz as. I always want to say your full name. To the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee.
Moved by Councillor Hilderman. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried, or sorry, opposed? Carried. All right. We have an added agenda item. And find it, COVID rep.
Okay, so this is the last item between us and going home, and I'd like to say it's going to be quick, but I don't think it is. So administration, I handed out a confidential document to council earlier, just giving you an idea of what some of the other municipalities are doing. It's a fluid document because the rules are changing all the time, and these municipalities are also meeting with their council. So when we're having our discussion today, I would appreciate if we do not refer to specific people on this document, as their councils may have directed them differently since then, and I don't want to put them in a bad spot. So we also have, sorry, Karen, is Candace on the line still? Okay, so we have Candace available to speak to the business side of our COVID response if you want an update. We have met administratively, and you know that we have decided to implement mandatory vaccination requirements for all of our staff. And for those that cannot or will not get vaccinated, we have allowed them to take the test every 72 hours to confirm that they do not have COVID. The city was able to obtain several hundred free tests, and so we're offering those to our staff free until the end of the year, or when that supply runs out. And at that point, if we cannot source another free supply, then our staff will be required to pay for that testing themselves. We have also, or are proposing as part of the discussion tonight, closing to the public, our Public Works building, as well as the fire halls, so that council doesn't have to consider whether or not they want the REP program introduced into those facilities. We cannot implement the REP program in City Hall because it is essential service. And so we have to allow even unvaccinated people into the facility to pay their bills and that sort of thing. So this facility, we're suggesting, remain at 1/3 capacity with masking and social distancing requirements. The province has set out the latest order, and of course, that's the bare minimum. Council can go above and beyond that. So again, you could turn around and say, yes, we want the REP program in City Hall. But if someone comes in that refuses to show their vaccination status, we don't have the authority to stop them from coming in to pay their bills. That leaves really the rec grounds. And there's a lot of ambiguity around who has to wear masks and who doesn't have to wear masks. And so we have Paul and Alan here to speak to the effects of what will happen in each of the facilities. So basically, we were looking at City Hall and whether or not we open up during the lunch hour to provide extra time for people to pay bills and what that cost would look at right now. And then in the rec facilities, and Paul can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think regardless of whether or not we go with the current restrictions, which is 1/3 capacity masking and social distancing, or you move to a rep program, we would suggest that we have security there as our staff are, they're getting harassed pretty badly either way. And we know if we move to a rep program, it's only going to get worse. So I will leave it to Paul and Alan to walk through the effects of each of these buildings, and then we can have discussions on which direction council would like us to go. Are you going to rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first?
To council, we could do rock, paper, scissors if you wish, or we could just get going. Come on. All right, okay, I win. All right. I'll never see that ever again. So I asked my recreation staff to I've asked all my recreation staff as well as my enforcement and fire services staff to provide an update on the impacts of continuing at reduced capacity with the restrictions set out by AHS, or what it might look like if we were to proceed with a restriction exemption program. So if we were to continue operating without the restriction exemption program and just follow the reduced capacity restrictions that AHS has outlined, at the Manlock, we would have to limit the attendance at the Manlock and both the Civic Center. So Manlock with the swimming pool across the way, Civic Center where the ice hockey is played, to 1/3 of fire code occupancy. We have done this before throughout the pandemic, and it really doesn't have much of an impact right now, since our max for the pool right now is currently below 1/3 of fire code occupancy. So at the Manlock Center, because we don't have the lifeguards right now to do more than 1/3 of fire code occupancy, we wouldn't see much of an impact there. At the Twin Arenas, we would just have to ensure the restrictions are in place. Programming would be canceled. So with Manlock, we'd have to cancel their Aquafit classes and adult fitness classes. We would have to cancel adult users at the arenas and the drill hall as well. We would have to implement a screening procedure for all of our youth programs. That's the orcas, swimming lessons, dryland programming. And masking would be required in all common areas, as is we're already doing under the provincial mandate. So that's if we continue operating at a reduced capacity.
Sorry, one question on that. But in terms of the orcas, so is swimming or that type of physical activity or sporting event, does that qualify under the 12 to 17 exemption for the REP? Do we have the ability to exempt the 12 to 17 as per the province?
Through the mayor, I believe so. Yeah, that wouldn't cause us any issues. Number two, if we go ahead and implement a restriction exemption program, so that would allow us to continue without additional restrictions, and we could still offer adult programming. So the impact and the number one impact on our team at the recreation department, and as Sue's already noted, is that given the controversy surrounding vaccine passports and the unpredictability of the public, it'd be unfair to put our frontline staff in a position where they are asking for proof of vaccination and turning people away. If this is the decision that council chooses to make, we'd be looking for extra support for our staff to help them manage the public. And what we mean by extra support is essentially private security. In regards to the financial impacts of what that would do, if we were to go ahead with the restriction exemption program, our recreation staff in concert with our bylaw, I had them connect just to ensure that they were speaking to each other on this one. We would be looking for some funding over the course of 4 weeks. And then at the end of that month, after the end of that first 4 weeks, we assume, or we would hope that the people that were really opposed to it would get used to all establishments that they frequent to have a program, and that we don't know that the pushback would be as much. So we would like a chance to reevaluate after 4 weeks. And because we are looking at private security for those 4 weeks, and essentially we're asking for private security at the front door of both the Manlock Center and the Twin Arenas. The private security, Trent is connected with a few companies. They're able to do the security, but they're also able to do the looking at the vaccine passport and allowing entrance of individuals into the facility. So our recreation staff don't have to do that. But it does come with a price tag of approximately $15,000 over 4 weeks to have a private security company do that. I did ask CPO Sergeant Yeager what the impact would be if we were to repurpose existing bylaw staff and not proceed with private security. But that would essentially put us at a disadvantage in that we need those staff right now to be able to offer the same level of service that council is expecting in the community. And so I don't think that it's not really doable with our bylaw staff. And I did ask that question to see if we could save some money. So at this point, the only option really is looking at private security over a short period of time. And our administration recommends 4 weeks, but this is something where we would need to see how it's going and then reassess. We don't know that this would be something that we keep in place all winter. In regards to our enforcement services staff, the real impact there to both bylaw and fire is just, specifically bylaw, increased calls for service now because we're getting calls to the Manlock because somebody won't leave, and all those community bylaw pieces that you folks spoke about earlier with disturbing the peace and those pieces that play into this. Having the private security there at Manlock and Twin Arenas really heads off a lot of that. And it would be critical for our bylaw team to have a really good relationship with that private security company if we were to go there, just to ensure we are transferring information back and forth. Those are the impacts to the CPS division, and I'll let the GM Corporate Services speak to his.
Just one question first, I think, Councillor Hillgartner.
Through the chair to Paul, regarding our rec facilities, what about the sports league that already have put out memberships and stuff and stated to play, you got to prove you have to be fully vaccinated to play and so forth. So we have these leagues now to get their maximum people to play or over the 1/3 capacity. What overrules this? Like, I don't understand when we go 1/3, but you got the league saying that if we're fully vaccinated, we can all go in there and play. So we got a little problem here.
Through the mayor to Councilor Hillgartner, if we come back and we say we don't want to proceed with a restriction exemption program, our staff are essentially saying we wouldn't be able to provide any adult programming. If we have a league out there that says they're ready to go, we have ice time, and we don't go with the restriction exemption program, then we would not be able to lease out that ice time to those groups. They wouldn't be allowed to use the facilities.
So as far as we're concerned right now, all of our rec facilities are closed until we come up with a decision for the fall. Is that what you're saying?
Through the mayor to Councilor Hillgartner, as far as we are concerned right now, we're abiding by AHS restrictions, and we're currently not. I don't believe we are proceeding with any adult classes or league play at all right now.
No, but I'm talking about other leagues that the city doesn't run, but the city leases out to.
Like minor hockey?
Minor hockey, curling, whatever leagues are involved in it. Like they already issued, statements that we're ready to go and we're following Alberta health guidelines. For us to play, you guys have to prove that you're fully vaccinated to play.
So through the mayor to Councilor Hillgartner, we're only talking about Manlock and Twin Arenas, right? So you mentioned curling, but that's their own separate building and their own purview as far as what their rules are in that facility.
Okay, so then minor hockey would fall into the Twin Arenas.
Yeah, so under the current restrictions, ages like 12 to 18 are exempt, right? So they're able to play, but this would be adult programming, beer leagues and that type of stuff.
So if we don't implement the REP and we're operating at 1/3 capacity, why then couldn't the adult leagues, like a beer hockey team, why couldn't they play? They would be under capacity within the arena.
I think to the mayor, I'm going to have to connect with our manager of recreation as we talk here to get that clarification.
Sorry, I can add a little bit to this too. So the order was changed late last week and I printed off the one today just to make sure we're going off of the latest one. And so despite all of the other rules, an adult is not required to maintain distance if they're participating in outdoor physical activity or performance activity, while an indoor professional or semi-professional physical activity, if they're a member of that team, or while participating in an indoor professional or semi-professional performance activity. So they've set aside the league teams from professional or semi-professional. And I think right now they would be allowed to go based on the 1/3 restriction, but I don't know what that looks like exactly for, is it 2 teams that can be in there and nobody, no spectators and that sort of stuff? So they would have to work through those numbers. This is also some of the challenges that the other municipalities were running into where they were told by AHS, you know, if someone's there watching and they're in the age group that doesn't require vaccination, do they have to mask or not? And the answer was no. They can be in there without a mask so long as they're playing, but if they're watching, they have to have a mask on. And so then the issue came to the municipality is how are they going to manage that? So enforcement is the biggest key here, regardless of whether they're allowed to be there with a mask or without a mask. And that's why I think I alluded to, regardless of which program we put in, we may actually need someone there to help us maneuver some of these changes, especially with the masks. We see a lot of people right now that are refusing to wear masks in certain areas. We don't have any way to enforce that, regardless of the provincial restrictions.
And Mary, I have some clarification. So the piece that needs to be thought about here too is the spectators. So anyone coming to watch needs a vaccine passport. Under the current restrictions, they don't. And I think I was wrong on the previous statement I made about groups like Wetaskiwin minor hockey or curling not able to proceed. How the AHS restrictions, if you go with an REP, those organizations have to implement an REP for those groups to play. So it wouldn't be on us, it'd be on to Wetaskiwin minor hockey or curling to do those things. But without those, they would be unable to play.
And AHS says you cannot participate in adult sports if not under the COVID passport system. So you have to be under that REP. So it wouldn't matter whether or not we implemented it or not. If we were at the 1/3 capacity, they couldn't participate if they weren't operating under the REP.
So are you saying we don't have to have an REP in place, but they have to follow an REP?
Correct.
Okay.
That's AHS.
So our junior B icemen, they'd all have to be vaccinated to play.
If they were over 18. Because right now the exception is 12 to 17.
Right. And then the ability to have spectators would be based on 1/3 capacity.
Correct. And based on my attendance at the home opener of the Iceman game, I was probably one of 11 people that had a mask on. I'm guessing I didn't count. Sorry, carry on.
Sorry. Yeah, years of doing karaoke, you think I'd have figured out. If you are 13 and playing, you don't need a vaccine passport. If you're 13 coming to watch hockey, you do need a vaccine passport. So it's difference between being a player at that age versus a spectator at that age. An REP program would mean we can offer our city-run adult programs, essentially is what that means.
Administratively, you're looking for direction on whether or not we implement an REP and where.
Yeah, through the mayor, we'd be looking on direction on whether or not council wanted to implement an REP. And if they did, if you wanted to make it specific by location, I think Sue's already spoken to, where we would implement it. And then the third piece would be about funding for private security, if that was to happen from our recreation department's perspective.
I've also given Karen 2 potential motions, depending on which way council is going to go. I drafted those based on discussions that I've heard today and only included them at the rec center, nothing to do with City Hall because
You can't.
we can't. Yeah,
You're just closing Public Works and the fire hall to the public.
correct.
Councilor Hildgartner.
So to get my head wrapped around this, let's take the swimming pool for example. And let's say senior fitness or open senior when they go and do their walk around the lazy river or whatever. So if we did the 1/3 capacity, they wouldn't have to show proof of being vaccinated, but instead of 20 of them, there could only be 9 of them.
No, it's capacity of the building, isn't it?
Yeah, it's,
Well,
cap-
just, yeah.
yeah, it is capacity of the facility.
So how safe is that then? Then we're allowing, because I presume they don't wear their masks when they're in the swim pool. That's not very safe to the staff that's working in there that has to deal with talking to one of them or something like that. To me, it's the 1/3 thing is not logical. Either we're in or we're out.
There is a motion that somebody can make.
Okay. I move that the city council directs administration to implement the restriction exemption program in the following facilities. So that would be our Madaluck Center
We had Manluck and the arenas
Twin
separate.
Arenas,
and
yeah.
arenas. Okay. And that's the only places where we do have our own workers, city workers in those.
What about the drill hall and rental?
Yeah.
Is that
Sorry.
included in the Twin Arenas?
Exactly. I think that's one facility that they would manage together.
I would just want that clarified then, so that people know you can still rent the drill hall, knowing that it's under the REP. A civic.
Yeah.
And so then the Tri-Muni complex is on their own in terms of what they do.
And why is that?
Probably because it's a leased facility. It's not a city-run facility. So each of the, like the 3 entities in there lease their own space. So then we would be dictating what they can and can't do in their leased space.
So if, may I?
Mhm.
So if the curling association decided to implement an REP, and therefore there was not enough curlers to actually operate it, would they be asking us for a reduction on their rent because they don't have enough people in the building?
They could, and then that would be a decision of council, as it was when they were closed down due to the COVID restrictions.
But we wouldn't be closing them down, they'd be choosing to shut down.
Correct. Well, yes, because when they were closed, that was out of their control. They have the ability to operate now under the REP or at the 1/3 capacity. They have the opportunity to operate. How they operate is up to them. Councilor Billingsley?
What about the airport terminal and any of the other facilities that we rent out, whether it's Memorial
Mike?
Center? Nope, there we go. So what about the airport, the terminal building?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, I should have said we talked about closing the airport as well to the public. But the pilot's lounge, they're allowed to kind of come and go as they want. It's open 24 hours. We would put up signage just indicating that they had to follow capacity, 1/3 capacity, social distancing and masking. And rentals would fall under Paul's area too. So if a rental facility or someone came in to rent for a wedding, we would just make sure that they acknowledge that they've read and understand and are following the Order 44 with the province.
Councilor Phil Gardner?
Going back to the triplex, since we have 3 different renters in there. So let's say we have 2 on board with their exemption cards and 1 not. Are we responsible for control of that then, if there's a conflict, or is that just open game between the 3 renters?
But the gymnastics center would be,
The only problem we have is gymnastics and curling
well,
with the
gymnastics,
upstairs. The curling goes through a separate entrance. Gymnastics and your crafts go through the same entrance.
but the gymnastics kids are all underage.
But their
So-
parents.
So they'd be exempt from the REP program.
Okay. It's just their parents then, I guess, would be coming in
Correct.
and watching.
Yeah, the spectators.
Spectators.
And then, so I think that would fall under, like any other business, if, whether they choose the REP or they choose 1/3 capacity, then the province has mandated that. They have to make the choice to do one or the other. So if they're not, then it would be complaint driven.
Yeah.
Okay. Counselor Blatz.
I have a point of clarification from Paul. Did you say that we can't operate at over 1/3 capacity anyways because of staffing issues?
Yeah, to the mayor, through the mayor to Councillor Blatz, I believe so. Like right now, based off of our current lifeguard capacity, we really aren't able to operate from more than 1/3 fire code occupancy in the Manlock specifically.
So even if we did implement the rep program, we still would have to operate at 1/3 capacity either way, just because of staffing, right?
So could you repeat that piece?
Just even if we implemented the rep program, then even if we did that, we would still have to operate at 1/3 capacity regardless, just due to staffing, correct?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Blatz, there would still be capacity issues that we're having with staff based off of our inability to hire more lifeguards.
Okay. I have kind of a weird idea, but it could work to try and help alleviate some of the backlash and anger that there might be if we have a rep program. I was kind of wondering, nobody's done this yet, so I'm not sure if we're able to do this, where we could have 2 days of the week that are okay for unvaccinated people to go to. So like, let's say Tuesdays and Thursdays, they get their own time in the pool, and then we do thorough cleaning afterwards. And then the rest of the days of the week, it's the rep program.
I defer to administration.
Through the chair to Councillor Blatz, we can try to do whatever council directs us to. So I think the only thing Paul's team would need to do is make sure that they can staff those days where we're going to have a higher capacity.
Through the mayor to Councillor Blatz, just jumping on to the back end of this discussion. I think that the similar OH&S or safety concerns, though, the Councillor Hildegardner brought up earlier, are still prevalent in that we have unvaccinated people accessing the pool, and we've done our diligence to have vaccinated lifeguards, and then you're putting them that at risk. So that piece would still exist.
No, that's a very good point. I guess in regards to that, the staff wouldn't really be around the unmasked people though, unless, because they're not going to be operating programming anyways. So unless a lifeguard has to go in and save someone, they're not likely going to be interacting with that person.
Unless they're disciplined. Yeah, if you're always in the swim pool, lifeguard's always telling somebody, don't do that, or be over here, or whatever. Then you got the other problem too is total disinfecting the whole areas. And then what if you got staff that feel uncomfortable working that day with, letting people in that aren't vaccinated? Like, so if they say, well, I'm very uncomfortable, I don't want to work because it's unsafe to work here with non-vaccinated people. You're getting a whole bunch of issues that,
Which I do get, but at the same time, at the hospital, we always deal with unmasked people. And the way that we deal with that is we just wear masks.
yeah, but that's in the health service. Now you're asking a total different service group. to
No, I'm just
deal
saying
with
that because of the Alberta Health Services, that's their regulations, is the
Mhm.
fact that as long as we're masked, we're technically preventing spread,
Yeah.
especially since our staff members now have to be fully vaccinated. So that's just my opinion there, but I can totally see your side of it, though.
Well,
To the mayor, and just another piece of information for council is that we've spoken a lot about the 1/3 capacity and how it doesn't impact the pool as much, but it would impact the gym upstairs, right? So at our rep program, we're able to open the gym wide up and not have any restrictions. With 1/3 capacity with the gym, it makes it a lot more limited to community members. So I just wanted to make sure we remember that upstairs in the Manlock, the gym is used quite heavily.
I thought about going to the gym last week. Does that count?
Yes.
Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously.
Sorry, we would then need a subsequent motion for the security as well.
Nope. I look for a motion to adjourn. Do you have a motion?
Do you have any wording for that, Paul, for the funding?
I can just whip one up here. Move that city council direct administration to procure private security with funding of $15,000 to support the City of Wetaskiwin REP program,
Up to $15,000.
up to $15,000. Thank you.
And funded from the contingency reserve.
To support the REP program and funded from contingency reserve. Funded. May I make it just a small amendment on that, Karen? I move that city council direct administration to procure private security to support operations at the Manlock Center and Civic Center.
Up to 15,000. Can you put two after up?
you
Funding
got
up
two behind you. Okay, I'll make that motion.
Counselor Hillgardner.
I won't get elected, you know.
Discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously. Moved by Counselor Billingsley. Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.